Morning Joe, Monday 6 to 10 on MSNBC.
Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. Tonight's lead, the rematch. In 4 days, President Biden and former President Trump will square off in their first debate of the 2024 cycle. President Biden has spent the weekend prepping with trusted advisors. We'll speak to his deputy campaign manager shortly about new details we're learning about their debate week strategy. Former President Trump, meanwhile, has been holding rallies, some supposedly aimed at African-American voters, though his overall message can sometimes be difficult to discern. The two candidates face a similar challenge: how to sway voters at this late date amongst an electorate that has known both men for decades. Joining me now is Biden 2024 Deputy Campaign Manager Quentin Fulks. Thank you for joining us, Quentin. I know your team is very busy this weekend. As President Biden gears up for the debate, Vice President Kamala Harris sat down for an exclusive interview with my colleague Mika Brzezinski. The entire interview will air tomorrow morning on Morning Joe. But I want to play a clip where VP Harris talks about the stakes of this election. Take a listen.
I would ask people to really imagine what the world will be like on January 20th, 2025. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who has spent his life and career fighting for the well-being of other people, including health care. On the other hand, you have the former president who spent full time when he was president trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which, if he is successful as president again, would mean over 100 million people would be stripped of health care coverage. You have, on the one hand, Joe Biden, who under his leadership, bipartisan support for the first meaningful gun safety legislation in 30 years. And on the other hand, the former president who, when speaking of survivors of horrendous gun violence, says, get over it, and will proudly talk about how, to the NRA, about how he did nothing on the issue. And I could go on and on. I think that the debate is going to make clear the contrast between our president, the current president, who works on behalf of the American people, fights for the American people, and the former president, who pretty much spends full time fighting for himself.
What's your reaction to what the vice president had to say?
I think the vice president summed it up perfectly, Reverend. This is going to be a contrast of visions that Americans are going to see on the debate stage. One for President Biden, where he is fighting to protect people's freedoms and rights in this country, and one from Donald Trump, who pledges to be a dictator on day one, doubled down on ripping away reproductive freedom for women in this country, and continues to promote and express political violence himself. And I think Americans are going to see that in prime time on the debate stage this Thursday.
Now, tomorrow, your campaign will kick off a week of efforts to amplify the messages from the debate. These include traditional TV, advertising, mobilizing surrogates, and social media creators. Debate watch parties and an observation tomorrow of the second anniversary of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade. Talk about why these events surrounding the debate are so critical.
Look, Reverend, voters are beginning to tune in, and it's a priority of this campaign that we make sure that they have in front of them ways to be able to see the contrasting vision that the vice president laid out, that I mentioned in my first answer here tonight. And so our campaign is doing everything we can to make sure that we're getting in front of these voters where they are and communicating with them. We're very proud about the robust efforts. We just hired our 1,000th staffer in battleground states. We've opened over 300 offices. Meanwhile, we see none of that on the Trump side of the ledger. But again, it's really important that we do this so the American voters who are tuning in see the vision, one of revenge, resentment, and violence under Donald Trump, and one where President Biden and Vice President Harris are fighting for them every single day.
Now, you heard it from the vice president earlier, that one of the goals of the debate is to draw a contrast between these two men and what they hope to accomplish in a second term. That means listening to President Biden, but also listening to Trump, because he has a lot to say. Much of it is so ridiculous, it's tempting to tune him out. Here's something Trump said last night in Philadelphia while supposedly reaching out to black voters.
I said, Dana, I have an idea for you to make a lot of money. You're going to go and start a new migrant fight league. Migrants, only migrants. And then at the end of the year, the champion migrant is going to fight your champion. And I hate to tell you, Dana, I think the migrant might win. That's how tough they are.
We don't know what version of Donald Trump will show up at the debate Thursday, but if it's this one, how does President Biden respond to something like that?
And I think President Biden is going to have the conversation and take it directly to Trump about why he continues to do this. I mean, that clip you just saw, it's demoralizing, it's dehumanizing. Donald Trump has spent his entire career, his entire life dehumanizing, demoralizing people, because that's the only way he sees to be able to lift himself up, is punching down on the most vulnerable. We've seen him in his approach to immigration, separating families, putting kids in cages. This isn't about solving immigration. It's not about being tough on the border. It's a dog whistle. That's all Donald Trump knows how to do. And President Biden is going to call him out on that. He has no real policies. His policies are anti-American. That's not who we are. And President Biden is going to make sure that he reinforces that on the stage. But it is clear Donald Trump does not care about anybody but himself. And he will do whatever it takes, including break the law, to make sure that he gets what he wants. And I think that that's the conversation and the contrast that voters are going to see play out on the debate stage.
Before I let you go, NBC News caught up with former President Trump in Philadelphia. He said he knows in his mind who his vice presidential pick will be, and they will be at the debate on Thursday. Now, NBC News has previously reported the field has narrowed down to Senators J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, as well as North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. It does not seem as though any women or African Americans are still being considered. From the Biden campaign perspective, how much does Trump's VP pick matter in this race?
It's not shocking that there's no African Americans, no women being considered, given who the candidate is. But it does not matter to us who Donald Trump's VP pick is or who he selects, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a narcissist. He only wants somebody that is going to stand by his side and placate him. And they're going to stand on the same divisive agenda that Donald Trump is promoting, one of political violence, one of ripping away freedoms in this country, particularly reproductive freedoms, one where they continue to dehumanize and demoralize black and brown people across the country and the globe. And so regardless of who Donald Trump picks, our outcome and our approach is going to be the same, because we're fighting against the same thing. It's MAGA extremism at its worst with Donald Trump at the helm, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're drawing that contrast against Donald Trump himself, and the vice president looks forward to drawing that contrast to whoever he picks for his eventual VP nominee.
Now, Quinn, you are one of the heads of the campaign, deputy campaign manager. And you're also obviously a black man, and we all know you. How do you look at these black rallies that Trump had, Detroit, yesterday Philly, when blacks don't show up? These are mostly white audiences that are called black rallies.
I think it's demeaning, but again, I was going to say the same thing, Reverend. Black people have to show up for these to be black rallies, and Trump continues to throw the word black on things because he thinks that it will somehow fix his problem. But at the end of the day, we're very clear. The African-American community knows who Donald Trump is. The only thing that went up for African Americans while Donald Trump was in office was anxiety. Donald Trump left African Americans more uninsured. He left them more unemployed, and he continues to double down. He continues to say hateful things, and he continues to have racist dog whistles across his campaign. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're talking to Americans, not just about the vision that President Biden and Vice President Harris have for black Americans, but about the destruction that Donald Trump brought to black America and will continue to do so if he gets another 4 years in the White House.
Well, he's consistent. I don't know if you've ever been to Trump Towers, but I say it's like the Rocky Mountains. The higher higher up you go in the elevator, the whiter it gets. I've never seen a white employee at Trump's office. Quentin Fawkes, Biden's deputy campaign manager, thank you for joining us. Let's turn now to New York State, which, like most of the Eastern Seaboard, is in the grips of a heat wave that has lasted for 7 days now, with more than 100 million people under heat advisory alerts. Joining me now in studio to talk about this and other issues is the esteemed governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul. Governor, thanks for coming on.
Always great to see you, Reverend Al, especially in person.
Yes, it is a pleasure to have you in studio. What is the state doing right now to protect people from this intense heat wave, especially seniors and people living in low-income areas?
As you said, Reverend Al, we are in the throes of a heat wave, the likes of which we've never seen, these high temperatures at this early date in the year. So we're not just doing something now. We've been preparing for the last 10 days, knowing that this could be a deadly event. Fortunately, we don't have any recorded loss of life, but our seniors are the most vulnerable. And we're getting messages out about people taking care of their senior neighbors, checking in on them, making sure that they have plenty of water, staying out of the heat, but also it's children and pets. So we have been ready. I've had the National Guard on call. We've worked with all the local county governments to make sure that we could support their cooling centers and getting the word out. I even offered free admission to our state parks and beaches over a couple of days this week just to let people beat the heat. So we're getting through it, but I will say this, it is not over. This is the new normal. So we are always preparing for the worst case scenario, which is why I had intensive incident command center meetings with my entire team to say, let's game out. What if it becomes 120 degrees? What if we have people, overflowing in hospitals? Are they ready? So we're always prepared for the worst, but I hate to say this, we better get used to this. The way climate has changed so dramatically, we are feeling the effects in real time, and so we're always vigilant. We're experiencing tornadoes right now, tornado warnings in upstate New York.
Wow.
Rather uncommon for this time of year.
And some still don't believe in climate control. You know, as you are saying, many experts believe the high temperatures that we are seeing are the result of climate change. You took some criticism earlier this month for pausing congestion prices in New York City, a program meant to reduce greenhouse emissions by discouraging car travel in high traffic areas and bolstering public transportation. And then on the other hand, I was in some of the discussions, people were concerned about those that could not afford certain things. How did you make the decision